Hello and welcome to Talmud Vibes, where we try to talk about Judaism, Torah and Talmud in a more casual approach, yet keeping the ultimate respect for Israel's most precious tradition. My name is Yair Alon and I am a rabbi living in Brazil. In last week's Talmud Vibes, we explored the theme of the Jewish magical creature per excellence, the golem. Both in folklore and in Talmud tradition, we can clearly see how Jews have always had a deep-rooted connection with supernatural elements. And the origin of this connection can be traced down all the way to the very Torah, which tell us about many events in which tzaddikim and reshaim alike perform many deeds that could easily feature in blockbuster superhero movies. One of these episodes is told in Parashat Balak, Numbers 22, and involves an individual named Bilam, considered to be a very powerful sorcerer. He was so powerful actually that Torah says that whomever he blessed would be blessed, and whomever he cursed would indeed be cursed. Talk about magic powers. So, story tells us that he was sent for by the king of Moab to cast a curse upon the Israelites. If you don't remember the story, make sure to check it out in Torah, Numbers 22, as I said. Spoiler alert, he's unable to curse the Israelites and ends up blessing them 3 times instead. This is the origin of our Siddur prayer called Matovu, and that we sing in the synagogues until today. Thanks, Bilam. Well, besides Bilam, this powerful sorcerer, we all know or have heard about the Egyptian Magi's, or mages. In the story of Joseph, in Parashat Miketz, for instance, we see that the Pharaoh had at his service specialists in the art of interpreting dreams. In Parashat Vayera, the priests turned rods into serpents, just like Moshe and Aharon. And in Exodus 11, they turned water into blood. Although they are in the losing side in the end of that story, these acts reveal that they were quite powerful indeed and very able in terms of witchcraft. Yet, another very powerful user of supernatural forces is what has been known as the Necromancer of Endor. The story of this interesting woman is told in 1 Samuel 28. And there we read about how this necromancer brought the prophet Samuel back from Sheol to speak with King Shaul. Actually, King Shaul himself was the one that asked Samuel to come and look for the necromancer's services. Well, not only that woman brought Samuel, but she was also able to divine that the man who requested her aid was King Shaul himself. So maybe she was a necromancer and also a seer. Maybe the first question that comes up to your mind in this last episode is that, but doesn't the Torah forbid necromancy as well as consulting necromancers? So how is it that King Shaul is doing that kind of thing? So the answer is yes, the Torah forbids this kind of practices, and even though that the Navi tells us the story of Shaul going to the necromancer, and as a desperate move of his part. We can read a little earlier in the story that David had been establishing himself as the new king, both in terms of military prowess and social acceptance as well. And Saul seeks supernatural aids as a last resort. He feels he's losing his power and his kingdom, as indeed he is. In his book of Samuel, just before going to the necromancer, Shaul tries more kosher ways of help. He looks for the prophets and the Urim Vetumim, the oracle of the temple, yet to no avail. God is not answering him. It is in this scenario that he goes to the necromancer. The story makes clear, however, that Shaul himself understood he was not following a righteous path by seeking that woman. The Tanakh clearly says that he tried to disguise himself by changing his clothes upon visiting the woman's tent. More than this, Shaul himself, sometime before, had expelled the necromancers from Israel, because he knew that this was forbidden according to Torah law. So, when he first talks to the woman on verse 9, she declares that what he's asking of her had been prohibited by the king, referring to Shaul, unaware that she's talking to the very king right before her. Okay, but why had Shaul prohibited necromancy and probably other kind of practices? According to tradition, Shaul was only keeping Torah law, as I said. We can see in Exodus 22:17, for example, a commandment demanding that Israelites do not let a sorcerer live. In Shoftim, Deuteronomy 18, the text explicitly states different kinds of actions that are considered unholy and unworthy of the Israelites. Although we can have a pretty good idea about some of the terms used in this verse of the Torah, it is not so simple, however, to grasp the full meaning of some of the terms employed in these psukim. Either they have more than one possible meaning, or they are completely obscure to us, as no record of the exact concept has reached us, or even reached the Tanaim, our first generation of sages, in fact. As we go through the parashiot of the Torah, the pages of the Haftarah, or even the Zohar, we cannot help but notice how magic is ever present in Jewish literature. Yet, there is no simple word for magic in Torah. Sorcerers, wizards, witches, warlocks, seers, necromancers, and other such words are mere approximations to some of the terms used in Hebrew literature and should not be taken as an equivalent to Western tradition or pop culture usage, such as Harry Potter, Gandalf, or Merlin. There are many things that, to our modern mind, sounds like magic, and many of them are associated with the main characters of Torah. Moshe's staff becomes a serpent. Jericho's walls miraculously crumble to dust to the blast of the shofar. The sun stops in its track for 5 days while Israel wages its wars. For our sages, however, these events are not to be understood as magic. Let's understand why. When we think about any event in the Torah, we need to try and discern the origin and cause of this supernatural deed. Shmot 7:1, Exodus 7:1, expresses the notion that when miracles happen to individuals like Moshe, Elijah, or Joseph, they happen in accordance with the will of Hashem, of God. And as God commands, they do. So in Exodus 7:20, for example, Moshe and Aaron do as God instructs them and turn the Nile River into blood. In Exodus 7:22, the priests of the Pharaoh do the very same extraordinary phenomenon. Yet, despite doing the same exact thing, one of the acts is a wonder and a miracle, and the other one is sorcery or witchcraft. Why? Because one of them happens in accordance with the designs of God, and the other one serves the Pharaoh's pride. This is the line we can draw. Forbidden arts are forbidden precisely because they serve the selfish interests and ambitions of a person, as Rabbi Yohanan explains in Sanhedrin 67b. In order to clarify precisely what is allowed by God and what is not, and avoid breaking the law unintentionally, our Tanaim and Amoraim debate this kind of issue in the Talmud. Sanhedrin 65b, for example, brings us the discussion of two terms used in Torah: Abalov, usually translated as a necromancer, and Ideoni, translated as a sorcerer. Trying to understand the difference between them, the sages gives us a description of the method they used to talk to the dead. The necromancer, the Baal-Ov, let the dead speak from his armpit, and we are not sure what this means. The sorcerer, on the other hand, by placing an animal bone inside his own mouth. Talmud seems to imply that the necromancer somehow hosted the dead person's soul inside his own body, perhaps. That would be similar to some practice of some religions up to this day. Sanhedrin 65b then also brings us another term, the warlock, mechashef, which might indicate a general category of magical user, as Sanhedrin 67a seems to indicate, but unfortunately we don't know exact meaning of the word. Now, Sanhedrin also brings us a very interesting reflection. It is very clear that we shouldn't practice these prohibited arts. Okay, but there are people that do practice, and maybe they will do something to us or against us. In that case, should we be afraid of it? The answer is comforting, kind of. Rabbi Hanina explains in Sanhedrin that a tzaddik must not be afraid, for God is one and there is no one else beside him, and therefore sorcery is ineffective against a righteous person. So you already see what this is not exactly comforting, because here we have to analyze whether we are trying to beat tzaddikim and keeping the mitzvot, right? And who can really assure we are one of those? At least this is one more incentive to keep up with your Shema and Shabbat. And if you are not so sure you can be that safe from magic for being a tzaddik, Kabbalists will almost always tell you that there are segulot that can also be used to keep us safer. But that is a topic for another video, or to watch in the live streaming I have on the topic. It is in Portuguese, but you can turn on automatic subtitles into English. So tell us in the comments if you would like to know more about segulot, okay? Or also what other topics might interest you. So I hope you liked all that information about magic, and I think you realized it's more complicated than it looks at a first glance, right? Was that new to you? Is there any other use of magic in the Tanakh that you remember? Let us know in the comments. Before we go, let me remind you please of the importance of your feedback. What parts of these videos are you enjoying? What maybe am I doing wrong and I could improve? Which topics would you like to see next in this series of videos? Join us next week when we will be discussing a little bit about what is called the Sitra Achra and the Klipot, the other side and the husks, meaning the evil forces of our world. This is it for now. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next week for another episode of Talmud Vibes. Stay tuned, stay healthy, and all the best.